You want to throw your head gasket down. This is the distributor gear. Black link on the mark. Black link on the mark. Now it's worth mentioning your water pump should come with a gasket that fits. This one obviously doesn't, which is frustrating. It's not like I paid for these parts. No matter, we'll just use RTV. Smear it on with your finger a bit. And then this is held on with just like 500,000 10mm bolts. So I like to start with the top one, throw in the far side bolt, and then just give her with all the other ones as fast as you can, essentially. And then I want to say it was this long bolt that went through here. All right, so we're gonna do valves now. I'm not sure where I left off. Basically got the timing chain, timing cover, all that installed and bolted down. And we got, looks like the rad hose hooked up to the side. So to do valves, it's pretty simple. Just crack them all off. Essentially, you just take your feeler gauge. I'm setting this at 0.3mm on exhaust and 0.2 on intake. 0.3. Then you slide it between the valve surface and the rocker and move it so that there's no play. When I try and move this, nothing happens. Then I like to tighten down the nut, make sure there's still no play. Set down your feeler gauge, put the wrench on it, grab a screwdriver, turn it the opposite way you want to, and then tighten it gently with the wrench. That locks it in place. Double check your clearance is still good, and it is. You want it to have just a little bit of resistance on the feeler gauge, not a ton, just a bit. And repeat that for the next 8 valves. Grommet, spark plugs. So what have we done? We put the intake together, we got the wires on, broke this off, so hopefully it's not that important. Probably is, but we'll just pretend we didn't see that. It'll be fine, right? So we got to do the radiator, the fan. We still have to figure this out. I don't know how it's gonna go, so we're gonna try and fire on it without the alternator hooked up just to see if it runs. And we have some random spare things. I don't know where they go, so we're just gonna leave them unhooked and hopefully it works. But in terms of figuring out where all these vacuum lines went, if you want a more detailed video on it, I can do another one in the future, but basically I just attached this to the brackets where I can tell it bolts to. And then you look at where the hoses fit, because you can tell like these were sitting kind of this way. So you're like, oh, obviously this hose connects here, this hose connects here. This is not supposed to be broken, so it's supposed to be right there. And then these ones you could tell, oh, they obviously go to these 4, these ones, these 4, etc., etc. Same thing for the wiring harness. So it all worked pretty good. We'll tighten these down. Maybe I'll set you folks down while I tighten some bolts and then see if we can't fire on it. All right, hold on. You thought this was going well. Well, it's not. Small problem when you've never worked on an engine before and you're putting it together from a box of parts that may or may not have all of them, is that you missed some things. So we're gonna undo everything on the left side of the engine, that's the intake side, because we forgot to put one of the coolant lines on the block and we can't get it in there now. So I'll put you folks down, do a bit of a time lapse, and undo most of the work that I did yesterday. It's par for the course. You guys remember earlier I said this thing used to have a V6? You can definitely tell it's had the 4-cylinder in it for quite a while because of all the oil matching. Like, it wouldn't look like this if it was a fresh swap. So they definitely put a 22 RE in there and ran it for a while. It's interesting though, because the swap was done really well. Because realistically, like, other than the sticker, you can't really tell. That's kind of nice. Gives the truck a bit of a cool story. Fuck that hood. Just hit my head on this again. It's nice and sharp. That actually really hurts. This is the part that we forgot to put on. So now we got it in, so we're gonna redo the intake and everything. I hope all these vac lines are proper. I don't really know. I basically just laid them down and I was like, oh, this one, you know, probably goes there. These ones point here, these ones point here. We'll find out pretty quickly if we have all kinds of dash lights. But yeah, that's the gist of it. So I'll put you down for another time lapse and get back to where we were this morning. So now we're gonna do the wiring harness. This is where it's really nice to have actually taken it apart because you kind of know where everything gets routed. But generally these things are kind of like bent to fit to make them more compact. So you should be able to just kind of like lay it down and get a general idea of where things go. For example, like you can tell these must go here. A, because they fit, and automotive connectors are all just like specific, they're unique. So they won't fit if they're not the right connector. This snake, don't know where that goes. Probably an oxygen sensor, if I had to guess. I have to replace our fuel injectors because I see these O-rings are super crusty, but at this point, I just want to get this vehicle running. So we're gonna leave that for later. Blue on blue, red on red. All right, so we got the lower in. See, like, keep hitting this like every time. I think that's 4 times now. Take a shot whenever that happens. You'll be real happy by the end of the video. Anyway, we're gonna put the intake back together for the 3rd time, and hopefully we don't have to redo it. So let's come around to this side a bit. The gasket down. I'll grab the upper part, and I'll just fire it on. Come on! There we go. All right, we got that intake all installed. We forgot a bolt, so we had to take some stuff off again to put it back together, but that's how it goes. We're gonna fire the radiator in now. Stick her in. You can definitely tell it's a Canadian truck because you got the old hockey tape repair. So we're having some problems. When this thing was all disassembled, I put the key in the ignition to turn it over and just like see what's what, make sure all our lights worked, see how much gas we had, what have you. It was actually pretty good because all of our lamps work, which is super rare for me. Gauge cluster works, all that's great. The only problem is it doesn't do the same thing now. Nothing changed. I didn't touch anything. None of the fuses, anything are blown so far as I can tell. But we don't have any power anymore. I tried recharging the battery, same thing. Didn't make any difference. So now we're getting stuck into the fuse panel. We're gonna take this out, check for any loose wires. Maybe they got tugged on when I was fixing things. I'm not really sure. All right, well, we checked the fuse box. It didn't make a difference. So we're just gonna start unplugging the wiring harness at every point because the last time it did work, the wiring harness was not hooked up. So I'm guessing there's a short somewhere, and by unplugging it incrementally, it should reveal to me where that short is. Alright guys, I think we might have found it. It looks like the fusible link on this vehicle has been jerry-rigged. Well yeah, we found it. There's your problem. I bet you if I do that, everything will work. So we got the key in the on position. We're gonna turn it off and do some work on it. Yep, look at that. That is professional grade. Alright, so I'm gonna use one of those solder terminals. So So you guys, don't be daunted by electrical problems. They're not that complicated, especially when it's something like this where like no power anywhere. So it has to be something on the main supply line. They can be a bit more challenging if it's like only a certain bulb that doesn't work, but then you just got to find the supply line to that bulb. And more often than not, you'll find your problem. So we have connectivity. We didn't have that before. Oh goodness, this is turning into a nightmare. I'm worried that there's those same connectors inside the main harness right now. If they did it on something like this, and this is actually important, they definitely would have used it in other areas. Was I right or was I right? We got more very good connectors in here. So that means this whole wiring harness, probably like this. And given how there's wire sticking out, I'm more than willing to bet this is our problem why we can't get any dash lights. And I'm really hoping we didn't fry our ECU. All right, well, it runs at this point, but fuel injector number 1, which is right up in there, I don't know if you can see it, leaks like crazy. It shoots gas all the way across the engine. So we're gonna take this intake off for like the 4th or 5th time. I don't think I've showed you that because I just got frustrated and wanted to hammer some stuff out. Filming it makes it take quite a bit longer, but yeah, we'll show you this 4th time. We'll pull this off, we'll fix the leak, hopefully. We'll put it back together. Hopefully none of the other ones leak. And then we'll start messing with, we're gonna check all the vacuum lines because that's probably what's causing the idle issues. And then if that doesn't solve it, we may go in and replace temperature sensors because that's why the old 97 was, it was kind of running weird the same way when I put it back together. So we'll check and see if it's the same story. Alright, so we just replaced the O-ring. We're going to slide this into the fuel rail and then pump the whole thing into the block. Alright, it's all ready to go. So we'll fire it up, let it warm up. It's going to start misfiring. And then we will do some Googling to figure out where the temp sensors are. I get a feeling there's supposed to be one up in here. I think there's supposed to be a temp sensor in here, because this cable is just hanging and there's nothing for it to connect to. And I get the feeling there's also supposed to be someone in the front, because this one's going to be really hard for you to see. This cable has nothing to connect to. And given that this thing was a V6 at one point, and I know they just swapped the wiring harnesses by probably finding a 22RE at the junkyard and then taking the wiring harness and the engine, it's very possible that, you know, they maybe grabbed the wrong wiring harness, or they had to go back and get a second wiring harness, or maybe they even grabbed them on separate trips. I don't know. So it could be a little bit fussy, but the guy that I bought it from seems like he was pretty honest. He said all the parts were there, and so far we haven't, I mean, other than the new stuff we had to buy, the camshaft and the timing cover and everything, we haven't really, you know, everything has been there. So I believe him when he said it ran properly. I'm more than willing to bet the issues right now is vacuum lines being misrouted, or it could be the fuel injector, but I'm pretty sure it's not. It runs great when it's cold. While it's running, I'm going to go ahead and take you guys inside so we can test the transmission. Oh, we got a bit of blow-by, maybe. Burning coolant. Test if it's burning coolant because it'll kind of smell sweetish. Doesn't really smell like it's burning coolant, but it's hard to tell. If it doesn't clear up when it's warm, then it probably has a head gasket leak. Given that it's cold, I'm not that worried. What a sweet little truck, eh? Drive is good. Oh, the reverse light even works. It's evidently got some bad fuses. I wouldn't mind getting that dash cluster fixed. It's got torque. Got my foot on the brakes and it'll drive. Seems like a pretty good little unit. Yeah, I don't know. Seems like it works really well right now, but I know it's not going to stay like that. So let's go back out to the engine bay and wait till it warms up. Well, you can tell the coolant is not, the smog is cleared out, so it probably doesn't have a head gasket leak or anything, which is nice. That's kind of what we'd expect. You hear that? Now it's running like shit. And it's not because of the fuel injector leak, because the fuel injector leak is not really that bad. But it's just got up to a certain temperature, and I'm betting you a temp sensor is sending it a bad reading, causing it to screw with the mixture, and all go to shit. So maybe if I unplug stuff, I can get it to smarten up. So far, no dice. See, and then it dies. So, I mean, the distributor is slightly warm, but not much. So I'm more than willing to bet it's a temp sensor. It's kind of annoying, because we might have to take this off to replace the temp sensors, but we got to take this off to get to that injector anyways. Attempt number 5 or maybe even 6. But that's how it goes, especially when you don't know the vehicles that you're working on. Like if this was a Forester, I probably would have had it in 1 or 2 disassemblies, just because I've worked on Foresters a whole bunch. So hey, if you guys have a junked up Forester that you want me to fix, fire it my way, get in touch. It's nice that it runs cold though. That's a good bonus. So like we know there's no knocking in the bottom end. We know the top end is good. The cylinder head was rebuilt properly. Our valve lash is fine. We know it's timed all right. No massive exhaust leaks. The brakes seem to work. Power steering seems to work. You heard it revving quite nicely, and the transmission's good. So that's still a pretty huge win. But yeah, you can tell the temperature's not even really registering on the gauge. It's just barely up from where it rests when it's like cold. Has most of a tank of gas though. That's a win. Take the keys out so we don't kill the batteries. So you got a pretty good idea what it's doing. It runs, gets warm, and then does this. So we're gonna go to the bigger truck and pull out the temperature sensor and see if it does the same thing. Because although it's a different generation of vehicle and everything, probably similar architecture. So we'll pop the hood open. Heavy steel hood. It's on the left side. I wonder if that's a four-wheel drive, two-wheel drive thing. Okay, where was the temp sensor on this one? That's a pain to get unplugged. Unless you use the cheater connector, which is up under here. Can I get you a view? Right there. Well, it's got a check engine light on already. Let's turn off deep purple. It's funny, I bought like parts for an old Subaru. I wanted to do a dual range transmission conversion way back in the day, but it's really hard to find transmissions like that in North America. So anyway, I went and bought the Subaru up from a guy in Wetaskiwin, and in the Subaru was this tape, which is 1973's Deep Purple in Stockholm concert. It's got Child in Time on it. It's actually pretty sweet. So, because it doesn't have a CD player, that's what we listen to in the truck. Let's give it some revs. Yeah. See, this is what a bad temp sensor does. You guys hear the difference in idle between the last clip? So that's what a temp sensor can do. So we're going to do some Googling, probably get a new temp sensor, and then we'll throw a new temp sensor in the 90, and I'll be back with another video. All right, well, we rerouted the vacuum lines according to a picture we found on the internet. Hopefully it works. We had a couple that were in the wrong spots, so maybe that'll cause a hunting problem when it gets warm. Oh, maybe it's starting. It's going weird. It's getting warm. I'll be honest, it's kind of weird having a vehicle that has no tachometer. You're just completely blind on the rip'ems. But this needle is going higher than it's ever went before. And it's like pretty hot outside too, so it should be getting... It's got to be at least as warm as it's been before. So we might have resolved the problem, and we might finally have a running, driving 1990 Toyota Pickup. This is so satisfying, but I feel like it's at the point now where it might just snatch it away. Total pain in the ass. But once you get them figured out, best thing ever. Till that point though, they're a pain in the ass. And you know what? Past that point, they're still a pain in the ass sometimes, but they're worth it. I think we fixed it. I think we fixed it. I'm betting you that's what it is. Because now it starts right up. Yeah, okay. So we're going to adjust the timing and stuff. Because I feel like this is a pretty low idle. From what I understand, that's this screw. That's a pretty decent high idle, maybe, I don't know. Let's get a 12 mil. I don't know, it's definitely drivable at this point. So it definitely likes the timing to be more this way. I don't know if that's retarded or advanced. Yeah, I think she's ready for a test drive, folks. All right, first miles. Stops fine. It's got a bit of an exhaust rattle. Feel the power! Actually not a bad little truck. It accelerates. The brakes, you can tell, have a bit of oil on them because the pedal pulses. Alright, well, that's pretty darn good. For taking a vehicle that came with a disassembled engine that you've never worked on before, from a box of parts to a running, driving truck, in less than a week's worth of work, I'm pretty satisfied with that. Overall, it was a very challenging project. Way more difficult than I thought it was going to be, but you know, that's kind of what happens when you've never worked on it before. In terms of what I got planned going forward, I got to make a little boat rack, headache rack for this thing because it's going to be a fishing truck, obviously. I got a snorkeling trip planned. I plan to take you guys along with me in this truck to show you that you don't need a 4x to get out in the bush and do cool stuff. There will be videos on the headache rack and the snorkeling. And then otherwise, in terms of future modifications for this truck, I have a new set of shocks for it, so I'll probably do a video on that, although the ones that are in it are in surprisingly good nick, so we may not replace them. We might just keep the other ones as kind of spares. Anything else you guys want to see done to it, I would appreciate it if you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and show me your support. I might be starting a Kickstarter, so we'll be able to use those funds to do more cool things with this vehicle. For example, it could use a set of summer tires. It has winters on it right now. It could use a new set of front headlights because they're cracked. The tail lights are a bit crusty. Although, if I'm honest, I don't think I really want to throw a whole bunch of new parts on this thing. It's a 1990. Most of it's original, and I kind of like that. It tells a story. This is a classic little work truck, you know? It's super simple. It was used really well, had a V6 in it. They blew it up. They swapped it in for a 4-cylinder, so I think that's kind of cool. I would like to keep a lot of the parts